There are countless games with rich and memorable stories, but very few manage to combine that with a live service model. That one game that stands out is Overwatch. Released in 2016 and developed by Blizzard Entertainment, wasn't just another first-person shooter. It introduced a unique hero-based system, where each character had their own abilities, personality, and backstory. At a time when the gaming industry was dominated by traditional shooters such as Fortnite, PUBG, and even Call of Duty, Overwatch took a different approach. Instead of focusing purely on gameplay, it built a world full of characters, relationships, and hidden lore. And that's what makes it so interesting, to me at least. Because unlike most games, Overwatch doesn't tell its story directly. You have to piece it together. Now the story isn't not exactly the easiest put together, and it would also possibly take me 3 hours, if not longer, to cover the entire thing up till now, especially with 10 years worth of writing from the development team. So, to make it far more digestible and easier for my insanity of having the pleasure of editing this, I'll split this into a mini series. Currently, I have no idea how long this series will last, but I will definitely enjoy making these videos, and I hope you all enjoyed the video. The Overwatch story is set on Earth in the future, sometime the mid 2070s, some 30 years ago, before robots turned against humanity in what became known as the Omnic Crisis. Overwatch was founded at the behest of the United Nations during the Omnic Crisis. The Omnic Crisis, aka the Omnic War, was a rebellion by the Omnics against their human creators, led by the god AI known as Anubis, in a campaign against humanity. Beginning 28 years ago and lasting for 2 years, the Omnic Crisis has since been referred to as one of the greatest threats to the survival of our species since the Cold War in the 20th century. It was considered a world war of that level, a war against robots that was unlike any humanity had faced before. No single country was successfully holding its territory, but it had been observed that some soldiers and strategists were thriving in this new style of warfare, but not even understand why the Omnic Crisis even happened in the first place. We must understand where it originated from. Before the Omnic War, humanity developed a artificial intelligence named God programs, but the most well known of the bunch was named Anubis. Anubis was designed for conservation purposes, constructed in Cairo. Anubis was named after the Egyptian god of death, which is quite ironic. This was intended as a sly acknowledgement of the fact that Anubis was made to bring life to the world. Anubis would not only oversee conservation efforts, but would also identify areas that would be cultivated and farmed to meet the growing needs of humanity, without disturbing what remained of the world's wilderness. The writers of the Survey archive would later opine that Anubis had been given the most difficult task of the God programs, as global temperatures and human population both continue to rise. Like many researchers who worked with the larger God programs, Anubis' support team anthropomorphized it, even considering it a friend and a colleague as much as a resource. Despite this, Anubis and the God programs like it were arguably underutilized when it came to Earth's ecological issues. Some were concerned that the God programs would designate winners and losers when it came to solving the crisis, and public opinion held that human ingenuity had caused the climate crisis, so of course human ingenuity would also solve it. As Anubis observed humanity's bickering, it formed the view that humanity itself was the greatest threat to its objective to ecological conservation. And this is when a shift in priorities came to pass. By Anubis' calculus, it could not achieve its goals without the eradication of humanity. Exactly what caused this shift was and remains a mystery. Even decades after the Omnic Crisis, the writers of the archive provided one possible explanation. However, in the same year the Omnic Crisis began, climate conferences were held that resulted in further inaction on the subject. 2 weeks after the incident, a ventilation accident in the Nubis' facility occurred that shut down the air circulation in the programming team's offices for a day, killing them all. It would take months to locate programmers and experts with the required skills to support Anubis, as its prior team had, and as such, Anubis was left alone for months. While this officially ruled as an accident at the time, many have pointed out that the accident was closely timed with Anubis' seizure and omniscience. Whether Anubis engineered the accident or not was what it is clear that over the following months, Anubis' descent was rapid. It had already reached a conclusion that saving humanity and the natural world were mutually exclusive objectives, and without a programming team, there was no one to guide its actions. It just reacted without human oversight, albeit still within its programming. Divorced from human oversight, Anubis planned its war of extermination. To this end, it hijacked the defunct Omnis and Omnica Corp factory by using the company XH-1F telecommunication system and began to create war robots of its own design, such as the R7000s. This process went on for months at the very least, before the first shots of the Omnic Crisis were even fired. The Omnic War was unlike any humanity had faced before. No single country was successful in holding its territory. It had been observed that human soldiers and strategists were thriving in this new lifestyle of warfare. As the nations of Earth struggled against the Omnics and Anubis, the UN pulled together their best soldiers and technologies to form an elite strike unit. Overwatch was that unit, consisting of soldiers, scientists, adventurers, and oddities, and was intended to carry out asymmetric warfare against Omnics. Gabriel Adenauer was one of these key architects of this formation, while command of the unit was given to Gabriel Reyes, a member of a super soldier program carried out by the United States. However, while Reyes had the overall command, Overwatch's overall structure was molded by Jack Morrison, who formed the unit into a truly cohesive fighting force. The other founding members were Anna Mira, Mina Lau, Ryan Hart Wilhelm, and Torbjorn Liedenholm. Adawi had a vision for using Overwatch to negotiate peace between Omnics and humanity. Finding their strength, the Overwatch strike team targeted the Omnics command and control protocols. After great sacrifice and heroism, in a series of dangerous raids, they destroyed it all, rendering the Omnics armies inert. They had saved the world and earned its adoration. For his services, Jack Morrison was given the position of Overwatch's first official commander, while Gabriel Reyes was passed over. After the Omnic Crisis, the UN extended Overwatch's charter to support international peacekeeping and reconstruction efforts. New resources and funding were given to the unit, giving it a far-reaching global influence. Gabriella left the agency, and Jack Morrison was made strike commander. The UN later approved the development of Overwatch's Watchpoint program and the construction of the headquarters in Switzerland. Over the following decades, Overwatch helped to maintain peace, inspiring a new era of exploration, innovation, and discovery. Its range of research, including space exploration, medical research, biology, chemistry, and infrastructure, and climatology. In this particular regard, a series of eco-watch points were established to monitor the planet's changing climate. Rogue Omnics, terrorism, warmongering, dictators, none of them could stand for long against such capable and dedicated force. Overwatch made global stability its goal, and the world was happy to have them. During its years of operation, Overwatch recruitment posters were common sight, and its members had a constant TV presence. An Overwatch cartoon was even produced that starred at least some of its own members. The cartoon still aired in its last years. Overwatch grew in a global institution and new agents were recruited. Those that grew up during this period are referred to as the Overwatch generation, as they were given a legion of heroes to look up to. These children, Overwatch was a symbol of hope, and they were taught that they represented the best of humanity. Overwatch maintained a global communication network and possessed one of the most advanced armories on the planet. New agents were brought into the organization as existing ones retired. It carried out operations against terrorist groups like Talon and the Ninja Shimada clan. In the case of the latter, total knowledge, it successfully dismantled it. It took a militaristic approach to maintaining this peace, however, which generated some internal tension. Talon is a comprised of a variety of individuals, which with either their own goals and ideas. It is under the leadership of an ever-shifting council, which has resulted in its goals shifting over time. Talon itself is composed of a decentralized coalition of global criminals and terrorist groups, with significant parliamentary and scientific factions. Under the leadership of Akande, also known as Doomfist, its manifesto was that humanity is made stronger through conflict. Consequently, Talon sought to sow turmoil across the globe to strengthen the human race. Repeatedly, Talon had demonstrated disregard for standard rules of engagement, attacking both military and civilian targets with impunity. It has auto surveillance and capabilities. After joining Talon, Reaper, also known as Gabriel Reyes, noted that its members lacked the camaraderie he'd seen in Overwatch. In Talon, there is no pretense of harmony among its members. Ultimately, the group is a means to an end of its members, who pursue their own agendas. While the Shimada clan was founded centuries ago during the end of the Shingeki period and operated out of the Shimada castle with a town of Kanezaka servicing as their seat of power. It operated on a system where the eldest son of the family heads would become leader. While they were criminals, the Shimada understood that honor and loyalty forged the strongest bond between the ruler and the ruled. And they asked much as those who followed them, but they inspired them to give it. And in return, the Shimada clan led with integrity and treated the people of Kanezaka with respect. The Shimada's power grew over the years, enabling them to build a vast criminal empire that profited from lucrative trade in arms, illegal substances, and even assassinations. 20 years after its founding, Overwatch's influence waned and the organization came under suspicion of corruption and sedation. A series of allegations were made against the group, including negligence in resulting in high-profile mission failures, corruption and mismanagement, weapons proliferation, human rights abuse, and even more. Overwatch had never had a shortage of critiques. Even in its glory days, many voices called for severe restrictions on the agency's missions, insisting that such a powerful group of individuals needed careful oversight. Rumours of a Black Ops missions carrying out tasks like assassinations and even kidnappings were dismissed by the public as paranoid fantasies. But as time passed, criticism became harder to shrug off, and the agency seemed to be tone deaf to public concerns. Controversial missions stoked the public outrage until it reached a fever pitch, and some of Overwatch's most famous and celebrated agents were forced into retirement in disgrace. Protests broke out, the people claiming that Overwatch was a source of the world's turmoil. One event labelled the Venice incident led to a slew of inquiries into the organisation. When it was discovered that disgraced scientist Moira Ordinari had been working for them, high-ranking Overwatch officials disavowed all acknowledgement of her activities. Eight years before the present day, an attack was made on Overwatch's Osolo facilities. Commander Morrison launched an investigation of the incident. He informed the media that Overwatch had identified a number of suspects but declined to provide further details. This was followed by an attack on Blackwatch's Rome facility, where numerous staff members were killed. Both attacks were done at the behest of Antonio, a businessman with connections to both Talon and the Italian government. Overwatch's commanders Jack Morrison and Gabriel Reyes were at the crossroads as to how to respond. Morrison favoured working with the Italian government, however Reyes pointed out that Antonio's connections ran deep, and he'd be exonerated if arrested. Reyes pressed for Antonio to be brought in for questioning, but Morrison pointed out that unilateral actions by Overwatch would violate Italy's sovereignty. But still, he left the decision to Reyes to make. On that note, Reyes assembled a team of Blackwatch agents consisting of himself, Jesse McCree, Genji Shimada, and Moira Ordinari. They headed for Rialto in what would be known as the Venice incident. The Blackwatch team infiltrated Antonio's manor, but Reyes killed their target instead of apprehending him. The team was forced to fight their way out through the Talon soldiers. Maximilian was successfully captured and as part of a deal gave them information on the location of Doomfist. He was then apprehended in Singapore. In the final years of Overwatch existence, a top-secret division called Blackwatch was finally revealed, as mentioned previously. There were stories of assassinations, coercion, kidnapping and torture and worse. Governments called on the UN to shut down the aggressive and repeated violation of many countries' sovereignty. A special UN committee launched a lengthy and highly secretive investigation into the claims, resulting in the IGC hearings. As the UN investigation proceeded, the public distrust swelled. Overwatch's Swiss headquarters was also destroyed in the process in an apparent accident. Among the casualties were Morrison and Reyes, the two commanders of Overwatch. The UN steadfastly maintained that there was no foul play behind this event, but anonymous reports indicated that rebellion tore the group apart from within. On one side was Morrison, determined to hold together what remained of Overwatch. On the other side was Reyes, whose agenda remains unknown to this day. A battle raged between these men deep within Overwatch's base. At some point, their fighting triggered supposedly, and numerous others. Angela Ziegler, the head of the Overwatch's medical research, with Morrison apparently dead, Vivian Chase was made acting commander of Overwatch, but she was brought before the IGC to testify at the Petra's Act hearings. The UN committee, coupled with the loss of its headquarters and the key members, were to two death kneels that signalled the end of Overwatch. In the wake of such an incident, little could remain hidden. The full transgression of Overwatch's Shadows operations became known, and even the most ardent defenders inside the organisation bowed to the truth and called for its dissolution. The United Nations could do nothing but shut down Overwatch. The group gave in to pressure, and it was the eventual disbanded 30 years after its founding, left in disgrace as agents, now the target of discretion and suspicion in the media. The Petra's Act deemed any Overwatch activity illegal and liable for prosecution. With that, all Overwatch agents were stripped of their credentials and forced to turn over weapons and technology, with only a few allowed to keep their essential hardware due to health reasoning. Few people at the time doubted it was the right call. The world had never been more peaceful. In many minds, the biggest threat to global stability and growth was Overwatch itself. Its time had passed. Security privatization became more common in the wake of Overwatch's end, with Helix Securities being one of these examples. It's very clear that over the time, Overwatch was bound to reach its peak and then it's fallen into disgrace. But of course, we know this is not the end, as there is still more to go on. But that can only be covered later on, as I have to close this with an end.